Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So we're first going to hear from Dr. Tam and Dr. New, and then we'll turn to Minister Bibo. Doctors?
Good afternoon, bonjour à toutes et à tous. As usual, I'll start with the latest numbers on COVID-19 in Canada. There are now 61,159 confirmed cases, including 3,915 deaths. To date, labs across Canada have tested over 940,000 people for COVID-19, with about 6% of these testing positive. As we are moving into social and economic recovery, I also like to tally the good news that currently over 26,000 or 43% of all confirmed cases in Canada are now recovered from their illness, and we wish them all good health. Today is Stop Clean Your Hands Day, which takes place annually in conjunction with the World Health Organization's global campaign for Save Lives, Clean Your Hands. This day highlights the importance of proper hand hygiene as a basic but life-saving public health practice. Personal hygiene, of which hand hygiene is key, is an important component of human well-being practiced the world over. In fact, hand washing can actually mean the difference between life and death. An early account of its life-saving ability takes us back over 175 years ago to a 19th century maternity ward, where new mothers were saved from deadly infections when physicians cleaned their hands before delivering moms of their babies. Later in the 20th century, Florence Nightingale showed how wounded soldiers were spared from deadly infections thanks to hand washing and other hygiene measures. It is hard to imagine that once upon a time the life-saving prevention power of hand washing was not known, especially considering its absolutely integral role in preventing the spread of infections today. So if I was to tell you that there was one super low-cost solution that could significantly reduce everyone's likelihood of catching a whole range of diseases, from stomach bugs to antibiotic-resistant infections and even droplet respiratory infections like COVID-19, would you pick a favorite tune and sing to yourself while you wash your hands for 20 seconds? Because that's all it takes. Hand washing is so important that I'm keeping it short and simple today. There's simply nothing like a splash of water, a bit of soap, and a 20-second scrub. Back of hands, front of hands, in between the fingers. Don't forget your thumbs and fingertips. Repeat often to beat back the bugs. It's a lifesaver. Thank you.
Bonjour. Comme d'habitude.
Hello. As usual, I will start with the latest numbers on COVID-19 in Canada. There are now 61,159 confirmed cases, including 3,915 deaths. To date, labs across Canada have tested over 940,000 people for COVID-19, with about 6% of these testing positive. As we are moving into social and economic recovery, I would like to tally the good news that currently over 26,000 of all confirmed COVID-19 cases in Canada are now recovered, or 43%, and we wish them all good health. Today is Stop Clean Your Hands Day. This takes place annually in conjunction with the World Health Organization's global campaign for Save Lives, Clean Your Hands. This day highlights the importance of proper hand hygiene. This is a basic but life-saving public health practice. Personal hygiene, of which hand hygiene is key, is an important component of human well-being practiced around the world. Hand washing can actually mean the difference between life and death. An early account of its life-saving ability takes us back over 175 years ago to a 19th century maternity ward. New mothers were saved from deadly infections when physicians cleaned their hands before delivering babies. In the 20th century, Florence Nightingale showed how wounded soldiers were spared from deadly infections thanks to hand washing and other hygiene measures. It is hard to imagine that once upon a time, the life-saving prevention power of hand washing was not known, especially considering its absolutely integral role in preventing the spread of infections today. If I were to tell you that there is a super low-cost solution that could significantly reduce everybody's likelihood of catching a whole range of diseases, from stomach bugs to antibiotic-resistant infections, and even droplet respiratory infections like COVID-19, would you pick a favorite tune and sing to yourself while you wash your hands for 20 seconds? That's all it takes. Hand washing is so important that I'm keeping it short and simple today. There is simply nothing like a splash of water, a bit of soap, and a 20-second scrub. Back of hands, front of hands, between the fingers. Don't forget your thumbs and fingertips. Repeat often to beat back the bugs. It's a lifesaver. Thank you.
Merci, Docteur. Madame Bibeau.
Thank you, Doctor. Madame Bibeau?
La pandémie de la COVID-19 a...
Hello, everyone. The COVID-19 pandemic has acted like a shockwave in our food supply chain, from farms to grocery stores. I assure you that we are working very hard with our provincial, territorial, international partners, with representatives from the agricultural and agri-food sectors, to ensure that Canadians always have access to good, fresh, affordable food. Today, Prime Minister Trudeau announced another series of measures to allow our agricultural producers and food processors to continue their essential work, which is, or rather, and to save our family farms throughout the country.
Investments today are related to the impacts on our farmers due to the reduction in food processing capacity, as well as the closure of many restaurants and food services. Before I proceed with the details of today's announcement, it is important to recall that the business risk management programs bring about $1.6 billion each year to support farmers facing different types of challenges. Avant de vous présenter les nouveaux investissements,
Before presenting new investments earmarked for the agricultural and agri-food sectors, it is important to note that risk management programs represent approximately $1.6 billion of assistance to agricultural producers. These programs, which are cost-shared, need to be improved. That is why, with my provincial and territorial counterparts, we've started to work on them, and we started that work last summer. In all cases, it's important for agricultural producers to take full advantage of existing programs. Other initiatives, such as those we are announcing today, will meet exceptional needs caused by the COVID-19 crisis. First of all, the Agri Stability Program was designed to limit revenue losses caused, for example, by a significant price decline, such as is the case for pork right now. All producers are strongly encouraged to join the program, and to improve it, we've made the following changes. The deadline for enrollment has been pushed back to July 3rd. To access more liquidity in certain provinces, it is possible to ask for a 75% advance payment, not just 50%. And to help them assess the support that they may be able to obtain, a calculator is now available online.
stability covers revenue losses, such as the decline of hog prices. All farmers are strongly encouraged to enroll in the program, for which the application deadline has been extended until July 3rd. Where the provinces have enacted the changes, producers can now access 75% of their expected benefit, up from 50%. And to help them estimate the level of support they can get from this program, a calculator is now available online. Agri recovery covers extraordinary costs faced by producers due to disaster. A province or territory must make a request to the federal government for the program to be activated, and the eligible costs are then shared 60% by the federal government and 40% by the provincial government. It normally covers up to 70% of eligible expenses. We are now making it up to 90%. Due to the unprecedented crisis and the meat processing backlog caused by temporary closures or slowdowns of plants, the federal government will make available its 60% contribution in all provinces or territories, whether the province contribute their share or not. Two of our main announcements today fall under the Agri Recovery Program. First, up to $50 million will serve as a set-aside program to help cattle producers cover the extra costs of keeping their animals on the farms while they wait longer to be processed. And up to another $50 million will be allocated to help pork producers cover costs of managing their herd. Agri Relance fonctionne sur une base.
Agri Recovery operates on a regional basis. Given the exceptional situation we are all experiencing, the federal government is going to make available 60% of its contribution for two specific initiatives and will leave each province the discretion of whether or not to contribute. Up to $50 million will be used to help beef producers deal with additional costs caused by the fact that they need to keep their animals on the farm longer due to reduced processing capacity. $1 million will be allocated to help pork producers and animals. The Agri Protection Program covers risks associated with natural disasters. Given the current situation, we are asking provinces and territories to recognize, as we are ready to do, the labor shortage as an eligible risk. This decision would assure producers that possible revenue losses caused by a lack of access to labor will be taken into account by the program.
Adverse weather or crop conditions. Given the current situation, we are asking provinces and territories to include labor shortages as eligible risks under the program. This would help to ensure the income lost by producers because of an insufficient workforce would then be taken into account through the Agri Insurance Program payments. Agri Invest allows producers to build a savings account through yearly contributions that are matched by governments up to $10,000 a year. Producers are able to draw on these accounts as they need them. Agri Investissement s'apparente à un compte d'épargne.
Agri Invest is like a savings account. Each year, governments contribute the same amount as producers do, up to $10,000. Producers can then use these funds at their own discretion.
Processors are vital to our food supply and our economy and jobs. Across Canada, meat processing plants have slowed down production or temporarily closed as a result of the impact of COVID-19. Other food processors are facing the same challenges. That's why today, we are also announcing a new investment of $77.5 million in support of food processing. This funding will ensure we can expand our capacity for Canadian-made products by adapting, modernizing, and reopening plants that have closed or are operating under capacity. The funds will also help food processors to implement measures to protect the safety of their workers so they can continue production during the COVID crisis. This program will be retroactive to March 25th. Nous allons aussi investir 70.
We will also invest $77.5 million to support the food processing sector. This funding will allow us to increase meat production capacity by adapting, modernizing, and reopening plants that have slowed operations or recently closed. These funds will help to better protect workers as well, and this program will be retroactive as of March 25th.
Our investments today are also addressing increasing surplus production of food across Canada. Farmers, mushroom producers, are facing higher surpluses due to the closure of restaurants and the hospitality industry. Therefore, we will invest $50 million in the first-of-its-kind food surplus purchase program to help with the purchase and distribution of surplus foods to organizations such as food banks who serve the most vulnerable in our communities. Un nouveau fonds de 50 millions.
A new $50 million fund will be used to purchase food surpluses such as from potato, mushroom, and poultry producers to support food banks throughout the country.
Gérer les surplus de lait.
To help manage dairy surpluses, we've proposed to increase the Canadian Dairy Commission's borrowing capacity by $200 million. This additional support will allow the Commission to increase its stock of butter and cheese to avoid the dumping of excess milk caused by the closure of many restaurants and other institutions. Our government will work with opposition parties to make these legislative changes.
To help manage the surplus of dairy products, we are proposing to increase the borrowing capacity of the Canadian Dairy Commission by $200 million. This additional support would allow the CDC to increase its purchases of dairy products, such as butter and cheese, to help producers to avoid dumping their milk. The government will work with opposition parties to achieve the required legislative change. These measures that we are announcing today build on the other initiatives we have put in place to help our farmers manage the impact of COVID-19. These include $50 million to ensure farmers can safely welcome temporary foreign workers and observe strict safety protocols, $20 million to bolster our Canadian food inspection services, $100 million to food banks, and $25 million through nutrition security for Canada's most vulnerable, and $5 billion in lending capacity for Farm Credit Canada, which has already resulted in over $3 billion in deferred loans for thousands of producers. And finally, $173 million in deferred loans under the advanced payment programs. I care deeply about the well-being of our farmers and food production workers, and understand how stressful this period is for them. Their safety is paramount. And as we move towards restarting parts of the economy, we must ensure proper measures are in place to continue to protect our workers. Depuis quelques semaines déjà à travers le pays.
For weeks now, throughout the country, our agricultural producers are going to the fields to plant 10 seedlings, take care of the livestock, and to look after our environment. Thanks to them, our grocery store shelves are full of good food. Let's encourage them.
To ensure we continue to have food on our family tables, they are providing our communities and our country an essential service during this critical time. Thank you. Merci.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. On va maintenant prendre
Thank you, Minister.
the room. One question, one follow-up, opérateur.
Thank you. Merci. Our first question, notre première question, nous vient de Hélène Bizetti avec Le Devoir. Please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Oui, bonjour, Madame.
Yes, Madame Bibeau. I would like more details about the $50 million for food banks. So we're buying surpluses and we're going to give them. But how will the distribution work? Farmers are not distributed uniformly throughout the country. How are we going to transport them? There's fees associated with that. How is it going to work? Answer. The goal is to work specifically with food banks on the one hand and with the representatives of the industries most affected on the other. We're going to start with our 5 partners. We're working with $100 million to distribute funds to various food banks to see what their needs are, what their capacity is. And by working with different food sectors, we're going to determine where the needs are. You've given some examples. For example, transportation, packaging. What are the needs? That's work that's going to be done in the next few days and weeks in order to match needs or to match surpluses and the capacity of food banks to absorb it. Question. Thank you. I'm at a distance and I don't see all the ministers present today. I don't know if Mr. Duclos or Ms. Freeland is there, but I was wondering if it would be possible to ask a question about the agreement concluded with the Wet'suwet'en. I'd like to know when the agreement will be made public, now that it has been approved, and the fact that elective chiefs have not approved it. Does that change anything about the government's plan? Answer. I'm the only minister present today. All of my colleagues are attending the virtual parliamentary session with the House of Commons that is sitting virtually right now. I'm accompanied by our public health specialists right now. I'm afraid I can't answer your question right now.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Opérateur.
Thank you, Minister. Operator, next question, please.
Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question, is from Briar Stewart with CBC News. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Yes, hi. This question is for Dr. Tam. Dr. Tam, I'm wondering if Canadian hospitals and labs are being encouraged to go back and test earlier samples, given that France has now found an earlier reported case of COVID-19. And I understand the WHO is calling for this as well.
I think part of our study of infections goes to some of the serologic assays. And so, and I think as you've heard, the Immunity Task Force is going to be looking at that and a sort of concerted study on the infections in Canada. And there's always a opportunity, I think, to sort of go back further if needed to test samples. We haven't actually, as I know it, discussed that as yet, but it's certainly something that obviously focusing on getting the current epidemic fully under control is our primary focus, but that is potentially of interest. So we can definitely take a look at that.
Follow up?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Very well. Operator, next question, please.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question, is from Michel Lamarche avec TVA Nouvelles. Please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Bonjour, Madame Bibeau.
Hello, Ms. Bibeau. I'd like to hear what you have to say about what the Canadian Federation of Agriculture had asked. We're talking about emergency assistance of $2.6 billion. Listening to you today, it seems that we're far from with measures that had been previously announced. How are you going to sell this to farmers? We're working with different agri-food and agricultural sectors. Keep in mind that risk managers included in that envelope and that we deploy in different ways. It's important to go and get that money in existing programs, first of all. Today, within those programs, we're adding 2 new funds that are dedicated to beef and pork producers who were part of the groups that were the most hard hit by the COVID crisis due to the closure or reduced operations in our processing plants. We're trying to work with them, and we're introducing sectors in the agricultural sector with Agri insurance and all of the efforts that we're making for temporary foreign workers. Our results for the month of April are such that we were able to bring in 90% of the workers we were hoping to get. It's less than a regular year, but that is part of our most optimistic scenarios because we know that agriculture requires workers. And let's not forget the $5 billion available in loans, but also in delayed loans through Agri funds. I would like to hear what you have to say about farmers who say that they are experiencing great needs. When are they going to start to receive these amounts? When will they see that in their bank account? Answer: we're going to try to implement this as quickly as possible. These are programs that will be deployed or administered through the provinces mostly, and I'm consulting with my provincial counterparts every week, some of them several times a week. I can assure you that everyone is fully committed to making sure that these programs are deployed as quickly as possible.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. We'll now
Thank you, Madam Minister.
starting with Kelsey from Reuters.
Thank you, Minister. Good to see you again. My first question is, Canada, internationally, we often run into issues when we announce support programs for agriculture because of concerns about them being seen as subsidies at the WTO. Have you heard, are you concerned at all about pushback from international counterparts about subsidizing agriculture by announcing these programs?
No, I'm not. We have made the verifications, and considering the actual situation and the COVID crisis, we are confident that it will not pose this type of problem.
And then my follow-up is, under Agri recovery, generally the ask has to come from the province. Now, I know that you said that the federal 60% is available regardless of whether a province wants to fund or not. I'm wondering if you've had any provinces, though, commit to fund the other 40%. Have any provinces said they're going to fund that side?
Well, we have started the conversation on the subject, but it's not up to me to make the announcement. So I will let the province announce whether or not they are contributing their full 40%, maybe part of it, and some will not. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Mike?
Hi, Dr. Tam. I just want a clarification really quick today. Have we identified any new cases early and late last year or early January that we didn't know about yet, or is that still under investigation?
No. I know that as part of looking at negative controls, different jurisdictions look back at but they were actually negative, and they form part of our control samples as we were looking at the development of the new tests. So I think that's about as close as we can say in terms of the preceding samples. But it is, again, a sort of retrospective look that can be entertained.
Hi, Minister Bibeau. Molly Thomas, CTV National News. You know, the biggest challenges for farmers that I'm hearing right now is planning for harvest, to figure out if they have enough to plan, if they're going to, need them many laborers, and will they have them. Is the federal government offering more money or any other incentive for students, for other workers to get people on the farm?
We have announced that we will be supporting the province for the program that they will put in place to some kind of incentive that they can offer in terms of wage for essential workers. So this is something that is accessible to provinces, and it's up to them to put the programs in place. And we have been working very hard, and we are still working hard to make sure that we will have the foreign temporary workers, as many as we can, because even if we can bring more Canadians in the field right now, many of them might be back to their usual work or back to school in the fall. So this is definitely an issue that we are following up closely, and we're doing everything we can to support the farmers, because we want to support them, obviously, but we also want to see this food on our shelves in the fall.
Mm-hmm. The Prime Minister also talked about more aid for agriculture. Obviously, the $252 million announced today falls short of what the Canadian Federation of Agriculture asked for, $2.6 billion, big numbers there. Farmers I just talked to on the phone, they tell me they need this extra support in days and weeks. A month would be too late. So how soon can these farmers expect more support than what we know today?
Well, I would encourage them to apply to Agri Stability right now and to get the 75% increase. Advance payment that they are allowed to. If they have Agri Invest fund, it's time to use it. And we will keep, supporting or bringing new programs depending on the needs, the specific needs of the different sectors and the gaps that we find between the business risk managements that are available and the extra needs caused by COVID-19.
Thank you, Minister. So we are going to turn back to the phone for 3 additional questions. Operator, over to you.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question, is from Philippe Vincent Foisy avec Radio-Canada. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour.
Yes, hello, Madame Bibeau. I wanted to come back to the question raised by my colleague about assistance plans, in which farmers are asking for 10 times more than what's being offered. The UPA insists that this is not enough, especially to face American competitors in certain sectors. What would you say to these farmers? They're in the field and their calculations aren't necessarily accurate. They don't have the same ones as you. What do you say to them? Answer: we continue to work with them. It's important to take full advantage of existing programs. They can't turn their backs on those programs by saying that they're not generous enough. We want to improve them. We want to fill the gaps. It's important to take advantage of what's already in place. We've announced additional programs today, especially for the meat sector. We're making adjustments and improvements to those programs. And as the Prime Minister said earlier today, we're ready to do more to help the agricultural sector. We're going one step at a time. We understand how important this is. This is about food security. It's important to protect our family farms as well. And we're working with them to support them throughout the entire season.
Puis, Puis pour le consommateur, quel est...
For the consumer, what do you believe the impact is? Will there be fewer Canadian products, products from Quebec, products will cost more? What will it cost consumers? Will it be more expensive over the next 5 months or 2 or 3 years? Answer. This is why we're deploying an assistance plan for the agricultural sector. We know how important it is to reassure our producers for them to go into the fields, to plant everything they need to plant. We want to avoid a reduced variety of our products or price increases. That's what we're working on. Of course, we want to promote Canadian products as much as possible. Also, we need to make sure that our supply chain is not interrupted, and it is very integrated with that of the United States. We need to maintain this trade relationship with the United States and our other trade partners.
Opérateur, prochaine question, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question is from Louis-Samuel Perron avec La Presse. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour. C'est une question peut-être pour la docteure Nam.
This might be a question for Dr. New or Dr. Tam. It's May 5th today. Last week, we had various scenarios for deaths. Today, we reached 3,915 deaths. And the projection from last week was different. What's happening? Answer. With the modeling we have, it's not a crystal ball. It's a tool for planning purposes. We're looking at what's happening with estimates. I have before me a graph, and if we look, there's a 95% confidence interval. Even today, the interval is around 95%. It's never a matter of having an exact number. There's always a range. We could also say that the data that we have today is part of adjustments that have been made to various models in order to plan for the future. Every single day, we receive more data, and that allows us to better project what's going to happen next week in terms of the trajectory of the epidemic in the short term. Thank you.
Oui, une question pour Madame Bibot.
A question for Madame Bibot. First of all, some details. You said that 95% of foreign workers in April who needed to be present are present. Mr. Trudeau was talking about 90%. There's also many fruit and vegetable producers who receive almost nothing now. What will you do concretely to help them? Answer. According to the last numbers, 11,200 foreign workers among 13,000 who were expected arrived in April. For fruit and vegetable producers, on the one hand, we are redoubling our efforts in order to be workers, and there's the Agri protection program, which is a harvest insurance program. It has been improved. Or perhaps not improved, but we invite the provinces to ensure that they include as an eligible risk the lack of access to workers. If there are losses in the fields because farmers did not have enough workers in the fall, that insurance program could cover those losses.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. Opérateur, prochaine question, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question, is from Stephanie Levitz with the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Good afternoon. My question is for Minister Bibeau. It is about the $50 million buyback program. There's, hundreds of millions of pounds of food sitting in Canadian warehouses. How will you decide where this money goes? Who will be able to benefit from it?
Well, we'll start the conversation with our main partners in the food bank category. So Food Banks Canada, Second Harvest, Salvation Army, the community organizations, and Breakfast Club. So these are the main partners we are working with for the distribution of the $100 million subsidy, and to identify their needs. And also we will be working with the sectors that are most impacted by, have the biggest surplus, like for example, poultry, mushrooms, potatoes, and we'll try to figure, how we can meet these surpluses with the capacity that the food banks can absorb, and what they need to be able to benefit from this food. So there might be issues around transportation, there might be issues around packaging, for example. So we will have this group working very quickly together so we can match the supply with their capacity to distribute it through the network of food banks across the country.
Thank you. My follow-up is for Dr. Tam. The percentage of tests that are coming back positive have been going up steadily over the last several weeks, but this week appear to have gone down. 7% late last week, 6.5% yesterday, and I believe you said 6% today. Is there any takeaway from that for you, or for Canadians for that matter?
Well, I think as a standalone, it's a complicated interpretation, but I think overall, we're seeing a continual slowing down of the epidemic itself. And some of the percent positive might reflect that epidemiology. So what we know is that despite increase in the amount of testing, that percentage positive is coming down. And that could be a reflection of the epidemic slowing down in different parts of the country. But also, of course, increase in testing means that you're probably testing more people who might actually not have the virus as you scope in more people. So it's a bit of a dynamic picture. But on the whole, this percentage, together with the other parameters, for example, the daily growth rate of cases is really slowing down. I think we've been saying on average about 3% daily growth now compared to much higher before, as well as the doubling time, which has really slowed down as well. So all of that points towards that this epidemic is slowing across Canada. But as I've said before, our number at the national level is a bit of a composite. So that percentage is variable depending on which province and territory you're in. In some jurisdictions, it's actually much lower than that.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll turn back to the room for one last question. Olivia.
Good afternoon, Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News. I have one question for Dr. Tam and one for Minister Bibeau. I'll start with you, Dr. Tam, if that's okay. New York put out a health alert last night about Kawasaki disease in kids and possible links to COVID-19. Are you asking pediatricians in hospitals to watch out for Kawasaki disease in kids here? And can you also tell us how many cases there are in Canada and what parents should watch out for?
So yes, the pediatric network is very active in terms of monitoring any outcomes or clinical spectrum in children with COVID-19. And as with other countries, the cases are much milder and less severe than in older age groups. And there has been some cases of, I think, a variation of Kawasaki's disease, which is a sort of inflammatory response, which is seen with many different viruses. So it's not necessarily linked to COVID-19, but they're looking at those cases to see what kind of conclusions they can draw. But there is no firm conclusion at all about the association of this in Canada. They are continuing to monitor and look at that situation. And but it is a condition. I think building upon our understanding of COVID-19 is that there seems to be a sort of inflammatory or post-infectious response associated with this illness. And so I think Kawasaki's or its variant might be just a part of that. But many other viral illness or bacterial infection can also cause it.
Thank you. And for Minister Bibeau, the decision to bring NAFTA into effect on July 1st adds to the harm that the dairy sector is facing and will continue to face in the coming months. So when will their compensation package be ready?
When we look at NAFTA, we have to look at the global economy for the country. And in terms of compensation, they have received their first direct payment either in December or January, early this year. And now we are really focusing on the support we have to provide, to counter the effect of COVID-19. But our commitment towards the dairy sector and the poultry and egg sectors as well is still very strong. And we will be moving forward later on.
Thank you, Minister. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse pour aujourd'hui.
And this concludes the press conference for today.